Good evening. I'd like to talk about several different topics today. One, I think, is on the hearts and minds of Americans everywhere. I want to talk a little bit about unemployment. I want to talk about the economy and what are the solutions to this problem, because this isn't very complicated, but people try to make it more complicated than it needs to be. When we get done with that subject, I'm going to change gears and do something that's a little bit more topical for the Thanksgiving season. I'd like to tell you the story, a great adventure story about the Pilgrims, about the Thanksgiving that they celebrated, and the many other ways that they've blessed our country. First things first, let's talk a little bit, though, about something that's on everybody's mind, the problem of unemployment, the problem of the continuous and rapid growth of the federal government, which stifles our freedom and liberty, buries us in red tape and bureaucracy, raises our cost of living, and makes life more and more miserable for Americans as they lose their freedoms, and the out-of-control spending that accompanies that. These are problems we've talked about. These are problems that the voters have voted on, and the voters seem to think that this is a problem, in spite of the fact that we're going to try and shove socialized medicine down the throats of Americans, in spite of the fact they don't want it. We're not dealing with unemployment. We're not dealing with the causes for unemployment. But I think we need to talk about it, though, a little bit, because it isn't as complicated as some of my colleagues seem to make it out to be. And it's not a matter of class warfare. It has nothing to do with that. It's just simple economics. Now, if you want to talk to anybody who's a small businessman and ask them, what are the things that kill jobs? Ask them, what are job killers? I would bet you they're going to be talking about things on this list right here. The first thing is excessive taxation. The second, insufficient liquidity. What does that mean? It means it's hard for businessmen to get money from banks. Economic uncertainty. People don't want to take risks when they don't know what's going to happen next. And then, of course, a whole lot of red tape and government mandates. All of those things are enemies to jobs and job creation. Now, let's go into this just a little bit, because this isn't so difficult. It's not a matter of class warfare. It's not a matter of rich people not paying enough. In fact, here's an interesting statistic or two. What do you think the 1% of Americans, what percent of the overall tax burden do they carry? What percent do you think the top 10% of Americans? Well, the top 10% of Americans carry about 70% of the tax burden in this country. And how about the bottom 50% of Americans? What percentage do they carry? Less than 10%. So I guess we've got a pretty graduated income tax. If that were the solution, we'd already be in great shape. But let's get back to the basics about jobs. First of all, why is it that excessive taxation kills jobs? Well, the reason is because the people who own small businesses create most of those jobs. Small business, maybe we should say medium and small businesses, that's people with 500 or fewer employees. And those are the businesses that hire 80% of Americans. Now, my Democrat friends can't seem to make this connection. If you kill the business, you're not going to have the jobs. If you tax the businessman's hide off, he's not going to hire people because he doesn't have any money to buy new equipment, put up new buildings, invent new technologies, and expand his business. And so the connection is pretty straightforward. If you want to kill jobs, you tax the guys that own those businesses. And a lot of those business owners don't really think of themselves as wealthy because they've started some little business, it's grown and grown and grown, and as it grows, they keep putting more and more money back in the business. Now, they haven't stopped to consider the fact that they may be multimillionaires, but they keep putting that money into the business grows and it hires more people. Now, if you are just so hung up on the fact that somebody is filthy rich, and you're so hung up on the fact that they may be having more fun than you are, and you got to tax them into the dirt, well, then you're not going to have any jobs. You just can't have it both ways. If you want jobs, you have to have healthy businesses, and you can't have healthy businesses if you tax them out of existence. So excessive taxation is just going to be a job killer. The insufficient liquidity, that is, if you run your banks and you have bank regulators all over the banks so they can't make any loans, it's hard for the businessman to get money to invest in new things. Obviously, economic uncertainty. Let's say you own a business. You've got lots of money tied up in it. Are you going to take a great big gamble when you don't have any idea what next goofy policy the administration is going to come up with? What kind of additional taxes and red tape and bureaucracy that you're going to face? No, you're going to hunker down and you're going to say, wait a minute, I'm not going to take any risks in this environment. Business is off. A lot of people are boarding up their businesses. A lot of businesses shutting down. A lot of jobs being shipped overseas. We create such a hostile environment for business. The big businesses say, okay, you show us the rules. You don't want to have your jobs in this country. We'll take the jobs somewhere else. The small businesses just close their doors, and the jobs are gone forever. So the economic uncertainty is a job killer. Of course, red tape, government mandates. There's one that should be in this list, and that is excessive government spending. That also is something that historically has always been a problem. Now, on top of the unemployment problem, on top of the runaway federal government that is no longer a servant but has taken on the master and is bossing Americans around and taxing them out of house and home and ruining the economy, if that's not bad enough, we've got another problem that's coming, and it's something that we need to deal with in the near future, and that's the problem of a huge tax increase that's just around the corner at the beginning of the year. So if we're already in trouble with close to 10% unemployment, and we know that excessive taxation is one of the things that is a job killer, do we want to then apply a whole bunch more, another huge tax increase to the economy? Most people would say you have to be crazy to do something like that. Most people, when they look at history, say that's the dumbest thing in the world, to have a huge tax increase right when the economy is having a hard time. And yet that's precisely what is going to happen next year if the Congress doesn't take action. What's happening because of some rules